right, so welcome everyone to this deep dive, and today we're tackling someone you might not know right off the bat, Rich Porter. But stick with us, because by the end you'll see why his story, man, is really something else. We're heading straight into 1980s Harlem, using just a snippet from his Wikipedia page, which, believe me, has enough to unpack. And get this, it's not just a crime story. It's about, like, crazy ambition, a whole community dealing with a crack epidemic, and this twisted version of the American dream, you know. Plus, you might have actually seen Rich Porter's story and not even realized it.
Yeah, you know Porter's life. It went down during a really intense time. The crack epidemic was ripping through places like Harlem, just tearing communities apart. Imagine being young back then, right? Limited chances, surrounded by poverty, and then bam, the fast money from drugs. It was like this unavoidable pull, you know.
And that's where Rich Porter comes in, right?
Yeah.
Dealing at 12 years old. 12. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it shows you the reality back then. But then he shoots up, becomes a kingpin, known for this, like, over-the-top lifestyle. It's wild, right? He's spending tons on clothes, cars, all while navigating this world of brutal violence. It's interesting, right? Because for Porter, it wasn't just about surviving. There was this, like, entrepreneurial drive in him, almost this messed up version of the American dream. He was building an empire, but on illegal stuff, you know?
Clear.
It makes you think about ambition's price tag, that pull towards easy money when the system, it just ain't giving you a fair shot. There's even that rumor, right, that he never wore the same outfit twice. It paints this picture of a larger-than-life guy, almost like a caricature of success in the drug world, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like a lot of guys who rise fast, his fall was, well, it was dramatic. Porter was killed in 1990, only 24 years old.
Yeah, they found him with like thousands of dollars in his pocket, shot multiple times. And the main suspect, his old friend and drug partner, Alpo Martinez. Martinez was later convicted for the murder. Talk about betrayal, right? From within your own circle.
And it doesn't stop there, man. Just a month before Rich's death, his younger brother, William, only 12 years old, he was kidnapped and murdered.
It's rough, man. The details are brutal. William's finger was cut off by the kidnappers trying to squeeze ransom money from Rich. This case, it shows you how violence just spirals, right? It's not just those involved, it's innocent family, too.
And here's the gut punch. Their own uncle was behind William's kidnapping and death. It's a family ripped apart by greed and the same violence that took Rich to the top.
It begs the question, right? How much blame goes to guys like Porter who choose this life versus the messed up system that creates these situations? It's tough to answer, no easy solution, but what's clear is this cycle of violence, it often eats its own.
It reminds you that we're not just talking about some abstract idea here. We're talking about real people, families, and the weight of the choices made in a world where options are limited.
But here's where things take a turn. Porter's life, his death, it becomes this pop culture thing. You've got the 2002 film Paid in Full, based on the lives of Rich Porter, Azie Faison, and, yeah, even Alpo Martinez.
And get this, Porter's character, played by Naki Pfeiffer, who also grew up in Harlem. It shows you how Porter's story, it goes beyond just being a crime story, right? It's about a specific time and place, but it touches on these bigger ideas that still hit home today.
Yeah, exactly. You're seeing a system failing its people, leading them down this path of violence and fleeting success. You know, it's not just a movie. It's reflecting a reality a lot of people face then and sadly still face today.
So we've seen Rich Porter, right, from the streets of Harlem to becoming a kingpin, only to meet this tragic end, all tangled up with betrayal and family loss. But this is just the start of our deep dive.
Yeah, now we got to dig into the why. Why did Porter's story become such a big deal in pop culture? What is it about this story that keeps grabbing our attention?
And the big one. What can WE, the viewers, learn from this whole cautionary tale? Ambition, excess, and in the end, tragedy. We'll get into all of that and more when we keep going with our deep dive.
One thing that jumps out from Porter's story is, well, the role of the cops back then. Our source mentions that him and his crew were constantly watched by the FBI's C-11 squad, you know? A whole unit just focused on busting drug operations.
Whoa, so it's like a real-life cop movie happening right there on the streets, these guys building their thing, and the feds are on their tail trying to shut it all down. Adds a whole other level to the story, don't you think?
Yeah, it does, and it makes you think about that whole war on drugs thing, you know? It wasn't always so black and white, and sometimes those lines between good and bad, well, they get pretty blurry.
Yeah, it's easy to just say, cops are good, drug dealers bad, but Porter's story, it kind of messes with that simple idea, doesn't it? He was a criminal, for sure, but he was also a product of his environment, a young guy without a lot of options.
Exactly. It's that whole nature versus nurture thing, right? How much is your path set by where you come from, and how much is your own choice? It's a question that sticks with you, especially with someone like Porter living in a world where survival sometimes meant bending the rules.
And maybe that's why his story pulls you in. It challenges how we think about good and evil, makes you deal with the messy parts of how people act. It's not just some simple lesson about right and wrong. It's a look into a complicated reality.
And after Porter died, things in Harlem shifted, right? Like a power vacuum.
For sure. It's like that saying, when a king falls, chaos follows, right? And in the drug game, chaos, man, it can get really bad. What happened to the people left behind, those who had to deal with what was left of his empire?
Well, his death sparked this whole power struggle, right? Rival gangs, former partners, everyone scrambling to fill the void. And the result? More violence, more instability, just like the source says. Innocent people got caught in the crossfire, and the community, which was already struggling, well, it just got worse.
It reminds you, right, that the quick money and power in that world, it comes with a huge price tag, paid not just by those in the game, but the whole community. And that stuff can echo for generations.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the violence either. The drug trade, it chokes out legitimate businesses, creates this atmosphere of fear. It's this cycle, And breaking it, man, it's tough.
So where do we go from here? How do we even begin to fix something so messed up? It feels like there's no easy answer.
You're right, there's no quick fix. But first, we gotta acknowledge this isn't just a cop problem, it's a health problem, a social problem, a human problem, We need to get at the roots of this stuff. Poverty, lack of opportunities, the whole system that makes the drug trade look appealing in the first place.
We need to put resources into education, jobs, and programs that give young people real choices.
Exactly. We got to shift from just punishing people to preventing this, helping people recover, and creating a world where everyone, no matter where they come from, has a chance to make something of themselves.
It's like a reminder that these stories, like Rich Porter's, yeah, they're captivating, but we can't forget the human cost, The victims, the families, the communities left behind, their stories matter just as much.
And that brings us back to Porter's legacy, right? How do people remember him, both in Harlem and beyond?
It's interesting, right? On one hand, he's this folk hero, a symbol of making it out, a kid who went from nothing to being a powerful figure. That classic rags to riches story, even though it played out in this dark and dangerous world.
Yeah, and it's key to understand that not everyone sees him the same way. To some, he represents this dark time in Harlem, a symbol of how the drug trade wrecked things.
So his legacy, it's complicated to say the least. He's a warning and a fascination, someone people admire and condemn at the same time.
And that might be why his story sticks with us. It forces us to face these truths about ambition, poverty, violence, and the choices we make when we feel like we ain't got many options.
It's a story that people still talk about, argue about all these years later. That in itself shows how powerful his story is and the questions it makes us ask.
Yeah, even after he's gone, Porter's life keeps challenging us, making us think about how complex people are and the mark we leave on the world.
We talked about Paid in Full, but how else has Porter's story seeped into pop culture? What other forms has it taken?
Well, you've got documentaries, books, even music, They all offer a different angle on his rise and fall. It's like his story has become this thing of its own, changing and fitting into different cultures.
It shows you how strong his story is, how it speaks to different generations and artists.
And it's not just the facts of his life either. It's about what his story embodies. Ambition, betrayal, the pull of the streets, family, loyalty. These are things that always get us, no matter when or where.
It's like Shakespeare on the streets of Harlem. Raw, real, tragic. It makes us face these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world.
And maybe that's why it still matters today. It's a reminder that what we do, it has consequences not just for us, but for everyone else.
It makes us think about the systems that keep people trapped in poverty and inequality, the temptation of easy money, and how violence just tears communities apart.
Hopefully, by looking at stories like this, we can figure out ways to build a world that's fairer, where young people can make better choices and have real chances for a good life.
So we've gone through a lot, right? Porter's rise, his tragic end, his impact on his community, how he shows up in pop culture. But before we finish up this deep dive, I want to circle back to a question we asked before. What does Rich Porter's story tell us about chasing the American dream and what some people will do to get it?
That's the big question, right? Porter's life, in a lot of ways, it's like a messed up reflection of the American dream. He escaped poverty, got rich and famous, but the cost, man, it was unbearable.
It's almost as if he achieved the American dream, but in this twisted, self-destructive way.
And that's what's so sad. He was ambitious, driven, had that hustle, but all that went down a road that ended with violence, betrayal, and his own death.
Makes you wonder, what if he'd had different chances? What if he wasn't caught in that drug world? Would things have turned out differently?
We'll never know for sure. But what Porter's story shows is that chasing the American dream can have two sides. It can push you to do great things, but it can also lead to bad choices, especially when the world ain't fair and opportunities are hard to come by.
It reminds us that we need to build a world where everyone has a real shot at that dream, not just a few lucky ones. A world where success isn't just about money and stuff.
Yeah, it's about a world where young people like Rich Porter have the tools and chances to actually make it, to reach their goals in a good way, and build a better future for themselves and their communities.
So we've covered Rich Porter's life, death, and how he's remembered. But what about those he left behind? What happened to his family, his friends, the people he was close to?
That's where it gets even tougher. Porter's death and the murder of his brother, it left this huge hole in the lives of those who cared about them.
It's easy to focus on the dramatic parts of his story, the crime, the violence, the money. But behind all that, there were real people whose lives were shattered, people who had to pick up the pieces.
His mother, Velma Porter, she went through something unimaginable, losing two sons so close together. It's a level of pain that's hard to grasp.
And his kids,
Yeah.
growing up without their father, carrying the weight of his name, the good and the bad.
It shows that someone like Rich Porter, his impact goes way beyond what he did. The effects of his life and his death, they still reach those closest to him.
It's a story about family, loyalty, and those bonds that stay with us even when things fall apart.
It makes us look past the drug lord image and see the real people whose lives were changed forever because of his choices. You know, it's kind of crazy how Rich Porter's story, even after we've peeled back all the layers, it still has more to say, especially about loyalty and betrayal. That whole thing with Alpo Martinez, it really adds another dimension to it all, doesn't it?
It's like a core element in these stories, right? That idea of brotherhood built in a place like the streets, and then it gets shattered by ambition, greed, or even paranoia. In a world where you're fighting to survive, trust is, well, it's precious.
No doubt. Porter's life shows how messed up that whole loyalty thing gets in the criminal world. I mean, these were young guys living by their own rules, rules that could change in a heartbeat.
It's almost like those old Shakespeare tragedies, right?
Mhm.
But instead of some fancy stage, it's happening on the streets of Harlem. Ambition, betrayal, violence, and then, bam, a tragic fall from grace. It's a story that's been told forever, but somehow it never gets old. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is that Porter's story makes us look at ourselves, you know? It asks us, how would I handle that world where right and wrong get all mixed up? Who could I trust? What would I be willing to sacrifice?
That's a heavy question, man. There are no easy answers, and honestly, I think it's something each of our listeners needs to really think about on their own. It's about recognizing that people are complicated, motives are messy, and even when things are tough, our choices, they define who we are.
And while Porter's life is definitely a page-turner, we can't forget that it's not just about him, right? It's about the people around him, those who are affected by what he did, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, it emphasizes that our choices have this ripple effect. They reach far beyond ourselves. It's like a call to do better, to make choices that lift up our communities, that create peace and understanding, and to push for a world that's fair for everyone.
So we're coming to the end of our deep dive. What are you taking away from Rich Porter's rise and fall? What sticks with you? And how can we use this story to start conversations, maybe even spark some positive change?
This is what we want our listeners to do. Don't just listen to this story and move on. Think about it, talk about it, use it to jumpstart some critical thinking and real conversations. The answers might not be clear-cut, but the act of searching for them, that's what matters.
And I think the last thing to remember is this. Even in the darkest parts of Porter's story, there's a glimmer of hope. We can change things, break free from those cycles of violence and despair, and create a world where young people have real opportunities to flourish.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the life and legacy of Rich Porter. We'll be back with another deep dive soon.